Fine.
Take
Okay.
two.
Thank you very much. Okay, the name of this story is Chanukah in Bergen, Belsen. So one of the last group of people who came into the camps very close to the end of the war was a Jew named, who everybody called Reb Shmelke. His name was really Shmuel Shmelke Schnitzler. And he was from a small town outside of, he was a small town in Hungary, not known exactly where. He was a chassid, he was a Talmid Chacham, and he came into the camps and he immediately made an impression. He was a tall, well-built man, and gave off a very nice appearance. He had these eyes that were both warm and also piercing at the same time. And one of the things that really amazed people about him was that, unlike everybody else in the camp, he just always seemed to be happy. He just always seemed to be of good cheer, and that's certainly not what was common. I mean, people were in a state of tremendous suffering, right? They were being treated cruelly. They had very little to eat. They were cold. They were very difficult conditions, especially in December. And yet somehow he managed to always be happy, always to have a smile, always to offer some kind of encouragement to a fellow Jew. He used to say, sadness and being Jewish is inconsistent. You can't be both a Jew and be inconsistent. And be inconsistent. Yeah, that you could. You can't be Jewish and be sad. So he did whatever he could to build people up. Like he would organize a minyan whenever he could, especially on Shabbos. And there were late nights, where he would gather everybody around him and he would tell these stories of great Hasidic rebbes. And just to give the people for a few moments, like an idea that they were not in this terrible dark place, but maybe they were someplace else at a different time. And he was quite beloved in the camp. As a matter of fact, he even had a kesher with a connection to some of the guards, some of the most cruel guards in the camp. Somehow he managed to create a connection to them, and he was able to use that relationship from time to time to maybe help them and get them out of some kind of difficult situation. So he was assigned the job. His job was to remove the dead bodies, which, and people would starve to death and somebody had to go collect the bodies. And instead of thinking of it as this gruesome job, he actually looked at it as the highest honor. And he did whatever he could to treat the people who passed away with respect. And I mean, in the limited situation of the camps, he did whatever he could to try and show those people respect. One of the things that was sort of on his mind in this period was, where was he going to find oil to light Hanukkah candles? Now, and he asked around, and people were like, oh, no, nobody's got oil. They're not going to let anything flammable float around here. There's no oil. You're not going to find anything anywhere. But he wouldn't let go of it. He didn't give up hope. He wouldn't let go of it. First of all, the mitzvah was very dear to him. But it was also, he thought about how much happiness it would bring to all the people in the camps. Like just a little bit of light, like seeing the weak overcome the many, the pure over the tamei. I mean, he felt it was such an important thing. Anyways, one day, it was a few days before Hanukkah, and he's walking towards the far end of the camp. He was told there was a body to pick up there. And as he's walking towards this barrack, he trips. And he realized the ground had sort of fallen under his foot. And he looks back and he sees there's a hole, like somebody must have dug a hole. And he looks at it for a minute. And then he sees kind of gleaming in the sun, there's something in there. And he digs it out a little bit. And could it be? Could it possibly be? It's some oil. I mean, he opens up the jar and he puts his finger in, and he immediately thinks of the miracle that happened, so many years before, finding this one pure pach of oil. And then he looks again and he realizes there's other stuff there, and he digs out some more, and he opens it up, and there's 8 little cups, metal cups, and some 8 little wicks. And he takes it, and he decides he can't take it. He puts it back into the hole, the oil and everything back into the hole, covers it over, smooths it over. First of all, it would be dangerous to be in the camp for it could be discovered. And he also thought maybe it belonged to somebody else. Somebody else had hidden it there. So he's kind of asking around, don't need any oil, just kind of subtly trying to find out whether there's somebody, it belongs to somebody. And everybody's like, crazy. Where we get oil? But after checking it out, so the next night, everybody is gathered around him in the barracks, and he's standing there, and he's got he's got the oil and the wicks, and everything's assembled before him, and he says the brachot with great simcha, with great feeling, and for a minute, everybody there is transported to a different time. Much like I always feel like I'm transported to a different time when the candles are lit. But these people were really, they came to a different time in their life. And he proceeded to do that all 8 nights. So it's just enough oil for all 8 nights of Chanukah. Well, the war ended not that long after. He had only been forced to be in the camps for less than half a year, and until Bergen Belsen was liberated. And he went back to his little village in Hungary to try and remake his life and as it was. And actually, a few years later, he had the privilege of going to the United States. And one of the things that was on his list of things to do, one of the things that he made a point of doing, is that he wanted to go see the Satmar Rebbe, who had been a great rabbi in Hungary. And he went to see them, and he was given a great greeting because the Satmar Rebbe had heard about the things that he had done in the camps, all the things that he had done for other people. And so so they're talking, exchanging divrei Torah for a little bit. And then finally, the Rebbe says to him, I heard you had the great honor of lighting Hanukkah candles in Bergen Belsen. And Schmelke is like, how did you know that? And the Rebbe says, I heard. And then he says to him, I'm the one who's buried the oil and the wicks. Before my great escape, the Rebbe had miraculously escaped in 1944. And he said, and I knew completely with my full heart when I buried it that the right person would find it at the right time, and they would know exactly what to do with it. That's the story. What a story. Okay, I got one more. I think I can do it. So this one, I actually did this last year, but it's such a great story, so you could do this one every year. This is Hanukkah in the American Revolution.
Wow.
So it's December 1777, and it's right, and the Continental Army led by General George Washington, they're camped out at Valley Forge. And the future president of the United States, he's very concerned. How are we going to function in this battle? He puts his officer's cape around him and his 3-cornered hat firmly on his head, and he goes out to look at soldiers and see how everybody's doing. And everywhere he goes, he sees, there's like little groups of men huddled around tiny fires. They're all dressed in rags. And he sees that they're like trying to get together some kind of hot meal or other. And, you know, some of them are sleeping on the ground. I mean, he's really sort of heartbroken. But then he sees this one guy, one soldier. He's got this little metal contraption, and he's got a few candles, a few tiny little tallow candles burning from this thing. And he says to the soldier, "What's that?" And the soldier like looks up, and there's the commander in chief, and he like jumps up, and he's, you know, like, and he's like a little bit put off. And then George Washington asks him again, "What is that?" So the soldier begins to tell him the whole story, and he says, "Well, he told him that the ancient tale, right, that the Greeks had taken over the land of Israel, and they were persecuting the Jewish people. They wouldn't let them carry out their religious practices. They weren't allowed to learn Torah. They're doing terrible things to women before they were met. You know, it's just really a terrible situation until they desecrated the temple, until the Maccabees revolted. They said, we're not going to take this anymore. And they got together whatever kind of army they could. And here they are. They're doing battle against the greatest military force in the world at the time. And there's like this like tiny little army, very not well armed, not well trained. These are just like us, you know, just like us, just like we don't have a lot of arms, just like we don't have proper clothes. You know, they were in the same thing. And he said, with the grace of heaven, he's telling this to George Washington, with the grace of heaven, the Jewish people were able to prevail, and they won the victory. And then he goes on to explain to him, and then they went to reconsecrate the temple. And the Greeks had brought in idols, and all kinds of terrible things were done in it. And miraculously, they found this little container of oil, and they were able to, the oil that should have been enough for just one day, miraculously lasted for 8 days. And George Washington's listening to this story, and he looks at the candles, and he looks at the soldier, and he says, "Thank you. You know, you've really, your words have inspired me. You're Jewish, right? And you're the people. Your people are the prophets of the world. And I'm taking what you've just told me as a sign from God Almighty. And we're going to go out and we're going to continue this war, and we're going to fight." So they do. And as they say, the rest is history. The United States wins. Sorry. The United States wins. So the United States wins the battle, and after that, their fate changed. Everything was turned around, and they continued. That was the first of many battles that they won, and they were eventually able to get rid of the British. Yeah, I know. It was a dark chapter. Yeah, and the United States was established. But here's another part of the story that is less well known. So this soldier, you know, makes it through the war, and he goes home to New York. And like 2 years later, he's sitting with his family, and suddenly there's a knock on the door, and he goes to answer it, and he's like two very like official looking people, and he's like a little bit, you know, and he gains his, after a while he like recovers, and he invites them in, and they do introductions, and the guy says, one of them says to him, "Here, I have something for you." And he pulls something out of his pocket, out of his coat, and it's a velvet box, and he hands it to him, and he's like, "What? You know, what is this? What am I?" So he opens it, and inside there's a medallion, and it has a menorah on one side, and on the other side it says, "With admiration, from George Washington."
Wow.
Right? So, and then he hands him a letter. And the letter says, I don't know what you accomplished that night at Valley Forge. I couldn't sleep that night because I was sure that we had no chance of winning. We lacked ammunition. We were outnumbered 10-1. We didn't have food or bedding for soldiers. When I saw those boys lying asleep in the freezing cold under those thin blankets, it took away my resolve. I made up my mind then and there to surrender. But your lights and your words change all that. If it wasn't for you and your menorah, I don't think we would be standing here today as free men. So we decided to present this medallion to you as a testimonial to that night, which was a turning point in our struggle for freedom. And this medallion exists today in the collection, the permanent collection of the Jewish Museum of New York.
Wow. Wow.
Thank you to Rabbi Tillis for both of these beautiful stories. Okay, a few announcements. I could stop recording.